midwives are kind of limited to what they can offer because a lot of the pharmaceuticals will also affect the baby. So that is why they use the nitrous oxide program, because they can easily adjust the ladies themselves. They take the mask, they hold it themselves, and if they don't feel comfortable, they remove the mask.
Yeah.
But that's going to leave a footprint. Thank God nitrous oxide is not delivered in a free-flow system, because for the climate and staff safety, that would be a concern.
Hello and welcome to the Sustainable Healthcare Podcast. Today I am going to talk with Jannik from Medclair about nitrous oxide, also known as laughter gas or ladder gas in Danish, and anesthetic used in the healthcare system and at hospitals. And it is also a big CO2 emitter. And Jannik has found with the company that he's working with a really cool solution for how to mitigate the negative CO2 emissions from using nitrous oxide gas. If you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe to it. Please share it with a friend. That helps us a lot. We are so thankful for all of you listening in and for all of you that are doing good work in making the healthcare sector more sustainable. It's never been more important. If you saw the recent IPCC report, we all have known this for quite a while, but we are longer forward in time and things are even worse. So thank you for everyone who's doing good work on sustainability in healthcare out there. Please enjoy the episode. Jannik, welcome to the Sustainable Healthcare Podcast.
Thank you. And thank you for inviting me. Very pleased to be here.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. I've really been looking forward to this. Today we are going to talk about nitrous oxide, anesthetics, and sustainability, which might seem like a bit of an odd combo. So first of all, maybe why is it relevant to talk about anesthetics and nitrous oxide in the realms of sustainability?
Well, very good question, and thank you for that. So we know that anesthetics in general come in with a footprint, a CO2 footprint on about 5%. And we know that in that group of anesthetics, there are certain pharmaceuticals that come in with a very high footprint on the CO2 emissions. And those are, of course, the ones that we target first. And among those are nitrous oxide. So if we now start to target the entire group of anesthetics, which one do we dig into first? Well, in my opinion, we dig into the ones, of course, with the heaviest footprint. And that's nitrous oxide.
Brilliant, short and to the point. So yeah, exactly. We know from the GHG accounting and the baselining that's been done in the national healthcare system in UK and Denmark and other places that anesthetics is around 5% of total emissions, as you say, and that is exactly because the global warming potential of these gases are many times like. I looked up that nitrous oxide was 273 times that of CO2. Some places might have it even higher. So global warming potential for our listeners is that if you notice that there's often a little E after CO2, it's because we are measuring in CO2 equivalents, because there are other greenhouse gases who are also negative, and some of them a lot worse, like nitrous oxide. So that is why we are here today, and that is why you are here. But first, I'd like to talk a little bit about yourself. So you are working with a company called Medclair.
That's correct.
Which is helping hospitals and other places combat the negative effects, climate effects of nitrous oxide. But how did you get there, and what was your story into working with that?
Well, it has been a long journey for myself. I am educated as an ICU nurse That's my background. I did.
ICU, what is that for?
That's intensive care
Yeah.
nurse. So I did work 10 years in the local Copenhagen University Hospital as an ICU nurse, intensive care. And then I was picked up by a gas company that is a global gas company. I was picked up by them in 2008. And my job for that company was actually with the nitrous oxide molecule.
Okay.
Educating staff, educating midwives, educating doctors, educating on a global footprint. So I had a global role where I did fly into hospitals and educated about how they could use them in a safe way. Along that journey, I started visiting Swedish hospitals. And when we started to talk about the climate effect, they were like, Mr. Jensen, don't mention it. We have it covered. And this is back in 2008. And I started to dig into it and say, hey, why do you say you have it covered? And they said, we destroy it. And at that time, I was like, what are you talking about? You destroy it. And I remember that they took me to a basement and they showed me like an oversized fridge at that time. To me, it looked like an oversized fridge. But it was not an oversized fridge. That was actually a destruction device. We're back in 2008. So,
and I'm amazed that anyone was even speaking about climate in the healthcare. I mean, we've known about the dangers of climate change for, seriously at least, since the 70s, and actually scientifically for 100 years. But it's very recent development in healthcare, so that's quite early in a healthcare setting. Yeah.
And when I talk about it today, I mean, the Swedes are very, very climate, focused. So when I talk about it, I also address this thing about, hey, electricity cars. I mean, when I started, to travel into Sweden in 2008, well, people were also talking about electricity cars. And I was like, will that ever happen to me? Yeah. How did I arrive to this office today, Joachim? Well, I arrived here with electricity cars. So I do think that this is going to come, right? Because when I then did travel into other countries, and I did mention this about, hey, the Swedes are also talking about that they destroy it. The hospitals that I visited, on a global footprint, they were like, yeah, but that will never happen here. I today visit the same hospitals, but from a different company. The company that I now represent are Medclair. That is the company that I did see back in 2008, or at least that's the technology that I saw back in 2008. Okay. So that's basically me and myself. Well, I do work with the molecule in a lot of ways. I know from a clinical background how they use it, the staff, of course, hospital staff. I know where I think it's good to have. I also know where I do not think that they need it. But I certainly today think that, yes, it should be used in a climate-friendly way because it leaves a great footprint. So, yeah, today my job is that I travel out for Medclair to different countries, different hospitals, and my focus is not so much about how they actually inhale it. It's more of, okay, what do they do with the exhale gas? How do they treat that? And, yeah, I work with an old technology. That's also what I kind of mentioned, is that along the sustainability road, there will be a lot of good ideas. A lot of good ideas. And I think basically, we're now in a situation with our climate where we should use all of them.
For sure.
But some of them are well tested. And this technology from Sweden, I think we could say that is well tested. It's an old technology. It's from 2008. It was installed in the first Swedish hospital in 2008.
And I think that's such a great point, that it's one of my key points, that in Denmark we talked about the hockey stick, that there's new technology just gonna come and save us by the last minute, so we don't really have to do so much right now. Yeah. And if you look at carbon drawdown and other places, there's very, very, very sound research saying that we have basically all the technology that we need. It's an implementation issue, it's a mindset issue, a systematic change issue, and I think this is a great point, that, that technology has been all around, and I assume it's only implemented in a tiny, tiny fraction of all hospitals.
Absolutely. I mean, if you now go to Sweden, I can certainly say that all Swedish hospitals install it. I mean, there is no doubt about it. And if you now look at, okay, why did this happen in Sweden? Well, it did happen in Sweden because the politicians started to focus on this in 2004. So they started to focus on the nitrous oxide programs in healthcare, leaving a great footprint behind, meaning that they were saying, hey, either we find solutions to deal with this, or we might need to terminate it. And all the clinicians came out, and argued that they needed to have this with them. They needed to have it in maternity. They needed to have them with children, emergency, orthopedic. A lot of different doctors came out and say, hey, we need it.
So yeah, maybe let's just roll back a little bit and start there. So, and if we have any Danish listeners, nitrous oxide gas is also known as laughing gas or ladder gas.
Yeah.
So first of all, just briefly, why do we use anesthetics, and what is anesthetics on a general level?
Well, anesthetic are basically used because they all come. You can kind of split them. So there will be the IV anesthetics. They, of course, also leave a footprint. It's going to be a different footprint. I don't think we should talk so much about that. But the anesthetics that I talk about are the ones that are dealt with as gases.
Yeah.
So they come in a gas form.
Anesthetics, we use it to numb the pain or take away the pain from, reduce it from various procedures.
I mean, the anesthetics that are used, let's say that you now need, you need surgery. You come into a hospital and you need surgery. The anesthetic doctors there will either go on an IV line, meaning that they put the pharmaceuticals in you by an IV line into your blood system, or they use gases where you inhale them.
Yeah.
So that's going to be two different directions, and that's really up to the local hospitals to decide which way to go. You will not know that as a patient. You will just hope for the best possible treatment, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of doctors are starting to think about the footprint that they leave behind on that anesthetic treatment that they provide to the patient, and they also now know that, hey, with the nitrous oxide, if that's what they're going to use on you, they will use it for pain relief. But it's not really going to have any sedative effect. They will need to put on another pharmaceutical. Nitrous oxide is used in a mixture with oxygen. It's never used 100% alone. So it will calm you down. It will take some of the pain away, but you need to be fully asleep because they might need to do something, cut you up or whatever you will need. So you will need another pharmaceutical on top.
Yeah, if you need to go to sleep
if you need to go for sleep, you will need something stronger than just nitrous oxide.
Yeah, so nitrous, it's in the lighter realms of anesthetics, and perhaps people have known it for if they've been to the dentist and had to get drilled in a tooth, or if they have been part of a birth. It's very common there.
Absolutely. I mean, when you talk about, and I talk about the nitrous oxide programs, well, we're based in Denmark. If you now go out to our maternity departments, we have 21 here in Denmark. All of them will have the program. So all 21 hospitals have the nitrous oxide program as an offer to the ladies. How popular is it then? How many of those ladies will raise the finger at some point and say, hi, I'm in severe pain. Please provide me with something for that pain. Well, that's 80%. So 80% of the ladies will at some point raise their hand and say, hey, I need pain relief. Can you please provide me with something? Midwives are kind of limited to what they can offer because a lot of the pharmaceuticals will also affect the baby. So that is why they use the nitrous oxide program, because they can easily adjust the ladies themselves. They take the mask, they hold it themselves, and if they don't feel comfortable, they remove the mask.
Yeah.
But that's going to leave a footprint. And that's going to leave a heavy footprint because they use it for a long period of time.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why it's, just for reference, like these 5% of total CO2 emissions that we're talking about from anesthetics, that's quite a lot. I mean, also given that we know that the healthcare sector in general is compromising some 4-5% of global emissions. It would be the 5th largest country based on CO2 emissions. So there's a lot of stuff to be done here. And I'm having a child myself. I'm becoming a father in 2 months' time.
Congratulations on
yeah,
that
thank you. So I've been in close contact with, or preparing to at least to get educated a little bit about nitrous oxide. And I assume it's something that my wife will take at one point during the birth. And I was even promised that I could try it out for a quick sniff in there.
You might need it to calm you down.
Yeah, that could very well be. Thankfully, we've been well prepared. So it's just it's very integrated, and perhaps you could tell us a little bit about on a technical level if. It's used in a variety of places in the hospital, but especially on the maternity wards. How is it set up? You inhale it with a bit like if you try to dive, or if you imagine a mask on a plane falling down that sort of covers your nose and mouth. But what's at the other end of the tubes, and what does the tubes do? And
good question. Well, from a clinical perspective, nitrous oxide is dealt with as a gas.
Yeah.
And when you deliver gases to patients, you can either deliver it with a free flow system, meaning that you turn on something and you have a constant flow of gas coming to the patient.
Okay, yeah.
That would typically be oxygen.
Yes.
So if you now come into a hospital and you need oxygen, they would turn on a flow meter and you will have 10 liters per minute perhaps into a nasal catheter, and you might only need 5. The rest of the 5 liters will just, go into the environment. Thank God nitrous oxide is not delivered in a free flow system, because for the climate and staff safety, that would be a concern. Of course, free flow of gas, they inhale 5 liters. The rest of the 5 liters, they just go into the climate, into the environment.
So you would have slightly high nurses from breathing in the room. Yeah.
No, for the both of these reasons, I mean, safety of staff and our climate, thank God we are not using free flow systems for nitrous oxide. So all maternity departments, a lot of other departments support their patients with demand flow. When I talk about it, I call it scuba dive equipment, because if you go out scuba diving, you would use the same technology. You only get gas on inhalation, and immediately it closes off. So it's kind of self-controlled by the patient. How much do they need? That's great. Great for safety of staff. Great for safety of our climate. Perhaps not so good for the people that sell the molecule. But I mean, that's not my interest. My interest is now to provide safety for staff and our climate.
Yes.
Demand-driven flow. So patients inhale it themselves. They control, however much they need. Some places will use a mixer where you can titrate to different levels. When you're going to become a dad, I'm sure that you and your wife will experience that is what we use here in Denmark. You can set different levels. So your wife might need 50% nitrous oxide. She might need 25. Okay. Here in Denmark, midwives are extremely well educated. So they will know that 50% is the ideal dose. They might also think that at some point your wife perhaps doesn't need that much. Maybe she has a side effect. Maybe it's that's even euphoria, and she lies there and laugh a little bit about it. They will then go down to 25%.
Okay.
This is good for the climate.
Yeah. So, the less gas, the less...
So they are extremely well educated. What now is a concern is, of course, what do they do with the exhale gas? What happens with that? And here in Denmark and in a lot of other countries, staff are extremely well educated and extremely competent about it. So they know that they need to capture the exhaled gas because of safety for themselves.
Yes.
That's the main driver for them, safety for themselves. Now we come in with our technology and say, okay, the gas that you now capture, where do you lead that to? Traditionally here in Denmark, our hospitals have led that to a ventilation system. And that would mean that this just goes unpassed, unfiltered out to our climate.
Yeah, into the atmosphere. And then we're back to this. It has a very high global warming potential, meaning that it's equivalent of emitting 273 or 300 times the equivalent amount of CO2. Yeah.
When I talk about it and I educate about it, and this is also from the literature. I mean, I'm a literature freak myself, so I read all the scientific papers. Well, the doctors and the people that now write articles are like, okay, 4 hours of intimate use of this pre-mixed. So you have the oxygen, you have the nitrous oxide. 4 hours of a mask on, mask off, mask on, mask off, because they will not inhale this for constantly 4 hours. 4 hours of intimate use is like now putting yourself in a gasoline car and drive 1,400 kilometers. So it really, really has an effect that staff members are good at catching the exhale gas. And why shouldn't they? This is also the safety for them. I'm pretty sure that the midwife you and your wife will meet will point out to you and your wife. You might even be the coach here assisting your wife that please exhale back to the mask. That will provide safety for me as a midwife, and I need to focus on both your wife and your baby. So please, exhale back into the face mask. And by that, we can capture it. Good for her. And we can lead it to not to the ventilation, because we actually now take the pipe going to the ventilation and turn that pipe in another direction and lead that to our technology.
Yeah, so you explained that to me a bit earlier, that usually the way these gas systems are set up is you have a centralized large gas tank with nitrous oxide that takes the pipe up for people to inhale, and then it will go into the ventilation system. And then the change is that you can actually destroy the exhaled nitrous oxide gas and break it down, and then it will have none or very much lower global warming potential.
We promise above 95% destruction. So everything above, we promise 95% destruction on everything that they can capture and guide to our system. We destroy it by a catalyst where we then split nitrous oxide to being oxygen, that's the O2, and the nitrogen, that's the N2. So when you have nitrous oxide, it comes as the N2O. We take that and we split that by heat to basically O2 and N2, and that's known as room air.
Yeah.
So that is what we leave behind. And why did the Swedes do this back in 2004? Why did they install the first system in 2008? Well, because of exactly the same reason why you and I now sit here, that the politicians knew about it. Our Danish politicians, they now know about it. We need to go into our hospitals and take that pipe and redirect that from the ventilation system to a central destruction system. I think that's better for the climate. That's our technology.
You have a quite specific case, which I think could be interesting to talk about, where you recently installed it at the Danish hospital, Hvidovre Hospital, at the maternity ward. Could you tell us a little bit about that? How did that came about? And I think you have some numbers on CO2 savings as well.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, why did the maternity department install the program? Why did the midwives raise the finger and say, "Hey, we need the nitrous oxide program"? Because without the program, you do not need our technology. I mean, that's kind of the thing you could say about it. We'll come back to that later. But anyway, so the midwife started to say, "Hey, we need to have more in our backpack supporting the women on the pain. We need more. We have some tools, but we would like to have maybe a tool more."
Did they not have nitrous oxide already?
No. So Other hospitals had the program. Some hospitals did not have it. And I think you might know it now that your wife is pregnant and you're having a child, that women start to Google, and they start to Google for, hey, pain, what's the options, that kind of thing. And what kind of happened here in Copenhagen was that women started to select the hospitals that had the program, and kind of not selected the hospitals that did not have the program. Of course, that was not good for this hospital, so they installed the program. They installed the nitrous oxide. This is 14 delivery rooms. It's the biggest hospital that we actually have in Copenhagen, or in Denmark, at least on women coming in giving birth. It's 7,000 babies per year. 14 delivery rooms. Now they start to pipe in the program. So you have like huge cylinders in a technical room. From that room, you have a pipe going in, and that pipe then runs into each and every one of these 14 rooms. There is a mixer, and then they titrate to the right level according to the women that kind of needs this. That's where we started. They have the program. Then they also knew that they're leaving behind a footprint. So after they installed the nitrous oxide program, they made sure that the pipe that they exhale back to was let into the same technical room where they had the cylinders. The pipe was let out to the climate because they needed, of course, to finance the central destruction system. It cost money, absolutely. So year one, that's where they installed the program. Year two is where they took the pipe running out to the climate and redirected that into our central destruction system. So that is what they have now.
That you sold to them from Medclair.
Medclair did provide that system. But that is actually the first system that we have provided here in Denmark, which I think is a little bit odd, knowing that all the Swedish hospital has this installed. But
you got your job cut out for you. So super interesting. So first of all, there was like a clinical need to get the nitrous oxide system. And then later on you came. Who was it that, was it the clinicians who said, we want to do our part in terms of combating CO2 footprint, or was that from, we worked some with the regions as well, and I know they're doing a lot of good work in terms of climate change, also very seriously in procurement. Where was the pull inside that organization from?
And that's what I like about this case, that everybody was on board from day one. So you had a group of very, very dedicated and competent people that all said the same thing. They said, hey, we need the program to support the women. That was number one. Number two was that they, of course, said we need to do this in a right way. Safety for staff is a concern, of course. We need to be able to collect the exhale gas best possible.
But I assume if you collect the gas and put it out into the climate, the atmosphere, then it can still be perfectly safe for staff. It's just not good for our global population.
Absolutely.
Or is there some safety measures that Medclair also brings, or is it solely the destruction of the gas, which is still great?
No. We focus on both things, but you could say so. You could say right now I'm involved in a situation with the NHS. This is the National Healthcare Service in the UK. For the listeners that do not know this, they use nitrous oxide all the time. It's deeply enrolled into their healthcare system, but they do not collect the exhale gas. None. I think it's like 85% of the UK hospitals that do not collect the gas. Meaning
so there's a staff safety concern as well.
Installing our technology now in a hospital where they do not collect the exhale gas, it's going to be difficult for us to destroy it. So in the UK, they kind of focus now on two things: safety of staff, but they also focus on the climate. Here in Denmark, we have always focused on safety of staff. So our staff are extremely competent on collecting the gas. Now we only need to pipe it into the right technology. And that is, of course, not the ventilation, because then we cannot control it. It's down to a central destruction system where we can heat up the gas and then bring it out to the climate as being air.
And how much did the system in Hvidovre cost?
The total system in Hvidovre was
Or
like
your part?
It was like 200,000 euros altogether. So that was the entire system. And if you now, this is what I talked.
The destruction system was 200,000 euros, or the entire nitrous oxide system?
The entire system.
Okay.
So our system was like, I think it was like 175,000 euros.
Yeah.
Could have been two. I think if you say 200,000 euros, you're on the right track.
Yeah.
I compare money to patients. I also compare money to patients to climate. But if you now take...
That's the change we need to make, is to have the climate into not as the only parameter, but also being a parameter.
I totally agree. But back to this competent team that was together on bringing this into Hvidovre. When I did talk with them, and they were all, very much focused on doing everything here right. Right for the patients, right for the staff members, right for the climate. When I talk about, okay, if we now do this right, everything right, what does it cost? I focus on taking the 200,000 euros and divide that out by patients. So I say, okay, if you now have the investment of 200,000 euros, what will that do for your entire CO2 footprint in your hospital? Because there will be a lot of good ideas that you can do, right? I mean, a lot of good ideas that you can bring in, a lot of good technologies you can bring in. My focus is on the nitrous oxide, where I say, hey, your CO2 emission, we can do something about, and there's actually a low-hanging fruit here. We know that the staff are already extremely good at capturing the exhale gas. We know that you have a pipe going to the ventilation. We redirect that down to central destruction system. What does that cost per patient? The best solution possible. What does it cost per patient? And if you take Hvidovre, this hospital here in Copenhagen, as an example, well, 200,000 euros are your total investment. Then you have the best possible for everybody. It's 7,000 babies born per year. You know that 80% of those ladies will at some point raise their hand and say, where's the nitrous oxide? Let's say that it's like 6,000 babies born per year at that hospital with nitrous oxide then. Our system will last at least 10 years. Meaning that in 10 years, the investment will have been used by 60,000 women. Now you take your investment of the 200,000 euros and you divide that investment with the numbers of patients that has used it. So you take your 200,000 euros, which might seem like a big investment, and you divide that by 60,000 women. I think you will come to a reasonable per patient cost.
It's a bit over €3 or something like that.
Exactly. So I think you will come to a reasonable cost if you now say, hey, best possible scenario for the women, best possible scenario for the staff, and best possible scenario for our climate. At that price per lady is a reasonable cost, I think.
And you have some data from... it's been running for a couple of months now at Hvidovre. Could you share that in terms of CO2 emissions?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what I kind of like about our technology is, as I said, it's old. So a lot of hospitals in Sweden will ask for CO2 reports. And our central destruction system is set up so you can generate those reports. So we can lively see today, what do we do exactly on the exhaled N2O, the nitrous oxide, in that hospital? I can even go in now and see, hey, there's actually, 2, maybe 3 births in process, and they're using nitrous oxide. I register it with my device. So we register all the nitrous oxide that comes into our device. We register that, and we break it down. We also register what we do not break down, because remember, we had the 95%. So some of it will pass. We don't break that. But the 95% we break down. So currently, I think it has been up and running for like a couple of months. And we have at that hospital destroyed 57,000 tons of CO2. So that's what we do.
57 tons or 57,000 tons?
57,000. Oh, sorry, 57 tons of CO2.
Yeah, which is still quite a lot. It's just
No, 57 tons of CO2. So why?
That's a bit. That's 3.25 Danish persons CO2 emissions per year, something like that. A Danish person uses around 17 tons of CO2 per year.
Our estimate is that we will be able to collect like maybe 500, maybe 600 tons per year once we get up and running on it.
Yeah.
So
are you expanding beyond the maternity ward as well, or?
That's the nice thing about the nitrous oxide program, and I think we also need to mention that when we talk about a sustainable healthcare service, I really like to work with the NHS, the National Healthcare Service in the UK. I think they're very much developed. I very much like that they have a healthcare system that is similar to us, meaning that it is funded by tax money. I like that because when they do guidelines based on scientific facts. So a lot of departments in the UK have the nitrous oxide program installed because it's cheap, it's safe. And it's scientific fact that it works. We do like that in
healthcare. Yeah.
We like that a lot in healthcare. The hospital that you and I talk about now, they also have the nitrous oxide program in different departments. So if we now visit it, you will find a cylinder containing gas using nitrous oxide in the emergency department. You will see it in the children department. I know that the department performing endoscopies are thinking about including it as well. So you have a lot of different departments that also use it. They don't use as much as maternity because maternity is a long procedure.
Yeah.
But they think about, or they have the program because they think about sustainable healthcare workforce. So some of those patients that we do mention here, children, emergency, endoscopy, some of those patients might need to go to general anesthetic. And these hospitals that we now talk about, well, they don't have the workforce for that. There are missing anesthetic doctors. They don't have enough nurses. This is also a sustainable path, sustainable workforce.
Oh, definitely. We are. I think almost all healthcare systems, well, a lot at least, are lacking staff and having a very hard
I
time.
did present myself as a nurse, right? Well, you and I are now sitting here in a small country. It's 6 million people. We have 21 hospitals. Well, here in Denmark, I read a report that we are missing 5,000 nurses. We need to be extremely careful about what we do with those nurses that we still have.
Exactly.
That's also a sustainable path to go down with.
And that's also, I mean, when we are... So, for instance, we are working a lot with public-private partnerships and sort of helping the private medtech or pharma companies. How can they work more with sustainability in the hospitals? And one of the key things that we always put forward is that it has to start with the clinicians. Forget any green solution that takes more man hours from the clinicians, because they're not there and it's just going to be a non-starter. But thankfully, perhaps like this, a lot of green solutions can also save time because it's about doing things smarter and being more efficient.
I really hope that we will come now into and I think we will do. I think we will come into a situation where healthcare will be short-staffed. And we will need to find sustainable solutions on it, best possible solutions on it. And I know that I work with the greenhouse gas, and I know that we need to deal with that. But yeah, I do think that this program, when I talk about the nitrous oxide, I talk about it as being a program. Do I think that that will be implemented in more departments and more hospitals? Absolutely, because the idea of using a pharmaceutical as a gas will also mean that you can fast track patients. I mean, your wife, when you will become a dad and your wife will give birth to a baby, why do they use it? Well, they use it because they can fast track the effect. So the effect wears off as soon as you kind of remove the mask. So
So
why
it's very flexible and it's non-invasive. There's a lot of
it does a lot of good things. So if you now go back to this hospital where we installed the central destruction unit, well, that hospital is now asking for mobile destruction units.
Interesting. Yeah.
And that's exactly the same thing, that we have downscaled our technology to being a mobile thing. So why should these departments not, and this is what they will try to do, they know that some of the most competent and well-educated healthcare staff that they have are anesthetic doctors, anesthetic nurses, and they're short-staffed. Meaning that some of the patients might not need that high of competence, meaning that they do not need general anesthetic. Is it possible now to relieve the healthcare system by removing some of those patients and take them, for instance, to another department where they have the program with nitrous oxide installed in a climate-friendly way on a mobile technology? Absolutely. And that is basically also what I'm extremely busy now doing, is that a lot of hospitals have the same problem globally. Short-staffed. What do they do about it? They need to have now solutions where they can safely use, and I say it wrong because I don't really want to say less competent people, but people where they can accelerate the education faster. And that is, of course, this thing about inhaling a gas as nitrous oxide with oxygen. What can go wrong? Well, things can go wrong, but it's definitely one of the oldest pharmaceuticals in use, so we know a lot about it.
So you don't need as specialized personnel with long specific education. It's faster to have a more generalized population of staff quicker become competent in using.
I'm an honest guy. I'll give you an example on it. And I did mention this thing about the UK, and I did mention that they have, a very, very tax-funded, tax-paid system. They have NICE guidelines for everything that they do. They are based on scientific facts. And the focus is, of course, money. Money. It's tax money. So if you now look at what they do with endoscopy is extremely painful. It's not pleasant. Nobody really likes it. What do we do?
Very briefly, I've had the pleasure of working with some endoscopy things, but for our listeners,
it's tubes. You place tubes in the body.
Yeah.
So it's a tube kind of a procedure, and it's not pleasant.
No.
So in UK they do that all the time with nitrous oxide. It's in the guideline. In Denmark we have a different system here. We call it NAPS, nurse administered propofol sedation. Meaning that we have, and I'm not saying it's not good, I'm just saying they do things different. In UK, they do it with nitrous oxide. It's self-administered. Patients come in. It's unpleasant. They know about it. They give them a face mask, and the patient will inhale this themselves, and that's the end of it. Once they remove the mask, the effect is off. Here in Denmark, we went another direction. We said, no, let's use propofol. Propofol is a well-known pharmaceutical for me, being an intensive care nurse. I use that all the time myself. It's sedative, so people will fall asleep on it. It's extremely powerful. We took some nurses and educated them how to do that on that procedure that they in UK use nitrous oxide for. It's just two different ways of going. One of them will be a faster way, and the other one will be a more slower way of doing it. I think the healthcare system in a lot of countries will now come into a situation where we talk about the climate, but we also need to talk about sustainability on our workforce, because we're going to be understaffed in a lot of different areas. I think we already are too. So two different ways. Which way do I like the most? Well, of course, I like the UK way the most. I also pay tax. Yeah.
But is there any argument against destroying the nitrous oxide gases, or are there any downsides or risks that would be worth mentioning to the Medclair technology?
When I think about this and I go back to the history, I don't see any arguments against it. Of course, it costs money. I mean,
everything costs money.
Everything costs money, and the investment needs to be made. But of course, this will cost money. But if you break that down and say, okay, the Swedes did take this discussion back in 2004, and the clinicians were very strong on it. They said, we need to keep it. You find a way to make this work for us. And now we have a situation where we can actually deal with it. We have a climate solution for it. We can break it down. We can make sure that the clinicians use this to support their patient, and we can even do it in a safe and climate-friendly way. I don't see that there's anything against this. Absolutely not. And when we think about the cost and we take that into account, that we're saving money, we're removing patients from general anesthetic, that's the one thing, and we're also doing something good for the climate with it. It's a no-brainer, Joachim.
What a way to end. Are there any last things you would like to share with our listeners? It's been wonderful having you, Jannik. Yeah.
No, I think it's a wonderful road to go down on. Medclair is I think we're a fantastic company, and we have a lot of interest from a lot of different countries right now. It's a very nice mission to be on. Absolutely.
The system captures the exhaled nitrous oxide gas back, and then you have this centralized destruction unit that separates the N2O, the nitrous oxide, into normal atmospheric air.
Yeah.
But it also, I assume, creates some, takes energy and other stuff to make nitrous oxide in the first place. Would it be possible to reuse the nitrous oxide in a way where it was still clinically safe and efficient for the patient to make sort of a looped system? Or
Fantastic question, and this is going to be a little bit complicated, but
bring it on.
Yeah, bring it on. But I mean, so all the gas that the staff can capture, either by a face mask or a mouthpiece, is going to be led into one of our units, either the mobile system or the central system. Both systems do exactly the same thing. They capture the exhale gas and they destroy it into nitrogen and oxygen, room air. What we do not capture is, of course, if you now come into the hospital with your wife and she's going to inhale gas from some kind of device, and she exhale back. What if she now exhale back into the room? It's still a climate, concern that gas is, of course, now not captured. The midwives will try, or the staff members will try to correct your wife and say, please exhale back to the face mask. I need to protect myself. We know now from the literature that perhaps 20% is not going to be captured. We still have the 80% that we capture, and of the 80%, we destroy the 95%. The 20% that we do not capture, when I talk about it, I kind of address the situation of my wife driving a hybrid car. Of course, that will, be very climate friendly the first 50 kilometers, but then she will drive on gasoline. I can live with the 80%. I know that we will improve. I know that we will develop technologies, but I mean, the 80% of this climate gas being destroyed is a good thing. The things that we do not destroy, and this is, of course...
But my question is actually a bit more around...
energy consumption.
It's around... Would it be possible to reuse the gas after it's and maybe not, because I mean safety and efficiency comes above anything else. So this is a dumb man asking, but
no, it's a very clever man asking. And my concern right now, is of course that we capture the 80%. The gas cylinders that are used for this, are they completely empty when they leave the hospital? If hospitals do not say yes to that, now we talk about it's impossible to reuse. We know now from studies coming out of the UK that cylinders are not used 100%.
Interesting.
Meaning that these cylinders are then returned to the company that made those. Let's say, and these studies that now come out say that they are returned with 25% rest gas. 100% nitrous oxide now being returned to the gas manufacturer. What would be nice is if they could reuse it. Could they empty that cylinder and bring it into the next cylinder, leaving them coming into the hospital? It's a pharmaceutical. It's registered as a pharmaceutical, so you cannot reuse pharmaceuticals. I mean, think about a tablet company. They would like to take all the tablets that are being returned to them, put them over in the next box, and that leaves.
It's actually a huge issue with medical waste in general, but it's also the hospitals leaving money on the table, sending cylinders back that are not fully empty.
It's a concern. It's a concern, of course, now for the healthcare service team that they do everything in their power to destroy the gas. Let's take this hospital in Copenhagen where we have the central destruction system. They do everything in their power to destroy the gas that they use, 80%. The gas cylinders coming back to the gas manufacturer, what do they do with them? Well, in Stockholm, of course, because they, did do the technology years ago, they are emptied to destruction systems.
Okay.
In a lot of other companies, they are just vented to the atmosphere, meaning that 100% nitrous oxide coming back in cylinders that are perhaps 1/4 empty, 25% are vented then to the atmosphere. That's not good for anyone.
No.
You cannot reuse that gas due to pharmaceutical
regulation.
Laws, and you cannot in hospitals. That technology has not been developed that you could use what you would call a closed loop. So your wife would exhale into a system, and that would just continuously be the same kind of gas that runs into a circular system.
Maybe one day.
Not invented, Joachim. Sorry to say.
No.
No.
Let's look at the
Let's look at
solutions
what we have.
Exactly.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
So to sum it up, there's a lot of potential in nitrous oxide gas as an anesthetic. It's very understandable why it's become popular. It has a major downside that it's really quite bad for the environment, compromising around 5% of total CO2 emissions from healthcare systems, and that is due to the high global warming potential. So that when it's let into the atmosphere and breaks down, it's a lot worse than CO2. But Medclair has made a way where you can not only capture the nitrous oxide, but also destroy it. 95% of it. That's amazing, Jannik. If any of our listeners out there are working in a hospital system or anywhere where this could be interesting, how do they get in contact with you?
Well, we're on the social medias. We're on YouTube. We're on LinkedIn. We're on Twitter. We're even on Instagram. So we are out there. Of course, we also have a homepage. It's called medclair.com. So everybody is more than welcome to find us there. My own name is Jannik Jensen, and I'm also a social media guy. So I am also on those channels that I just mentioned, and yeah, people are more than welcome to contact us. Absolutely.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so
really
much
good
for
conversation.
inviting me. Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you.
Hi, Joachim back here again. Wonderful episode with Jannik. Always love when we get close to the healthcare systems and anesthetics. It is a key factor. Around 5% of most healthcare systems of the CO2 emissions in most healthcare systems, and we really need to fix that. And I'm sure solutions like the one from Jannik and Medclair is one of the things we need to do. There are probably other solution providers out there as well. And just thank you so much for listening. Really appreciate it. Subscribe, share the podcast if you haven't already. Maybe you have a colleague out there who is getting interested in sustainability, and this podcast can hopefully be a good place to start. Take care.